Bob, good morning to you in Rhode Island, and I'm in Mumbai, the western coast of India.
Mm.
And I started by saying that this Vodcast is basically your product and not my product.
Mhm.
And you were the impetus. You gave my curiosity. Of course, I had some stupid research idea. That's how I did my PhD. But then wasn't into lean as such. It was more of getting that was the COVID time, and trying to how many books can you read?
Yeah,
And then I
yeah,
met Bob Emiliani, who was doing his summer festival, and I took part in it. The first book that I got was yours. That is the
yeah,
Triumph of. And those days we did three reviews. I think the first book that we did the review was on this,
hmm
and the third one is here.
yeah,
So all the three I attended, and that's the reason that I said this podcast is your baby, because you gave me the curiosity uh, of trying to find out the gap between SOPP and SOPK. Yeah,
yeah.
that stuck in my mind, and I said, let's do it. And so you are wholly and solely responsible. And thank God I met you.
No, okay,
And
thank you.
slightly late, but you were the real impetus which gave me that curiosity as to find out. And let me do my standard work by introducing you. So, Bob, can you see me? No?
Yes, yep, I can see you.
Why is it that I can't see you? I think I'll miniaturize this. Why is it that I'm not able to see you?
I
Uh,
don't know. My camera's on. I see myself and you. I don't know why you
you can't
can't see
see?
me.
That's fair enough for the time being. So, yeah, yeah. So let me go ahead by saying that you're on the 50th episode. And as I told you,
Wow.
that it was your curiosity that sparked me of the gap between SOPK and SOPP. So the series that I started, which you are on the 50th episode, and thanks for being there on the 50th episode. That's the episode I have to celebrate. I never
Yeah,
said
thank you for having me.
I never said implementing. I only said supporting and sustaining continuous improvement. So you know how much influence you had on me.
Mm.
So, and then I globetrotted, and if you can see, these are the speakers that have come on my show, right from United States across, and to Europe, to India, to South Korea, Japan, and Australia. And I imagine, Bob, that's the influence that you had on me, that I get guest speakers from all these places, and I have learned a lot of lean and different perspectives from all these people, all celebrities over there. And why do I have to introduce you to you? But then it is standard work. You did your doctoral work in engineering, a master's in science, chemical engineering. And I am always curious about chemical engineering. So you're an engineer, researcher, author, historian, progressive manager, teacher, education. And what I like is that you do everything yourself. You don't require an assistant, including the book cover. I remember that you said
Yeah,
that
it's
the
true.
book cover is also designed by you. And I still recollect, I think, in one of the episodes that I attended your summer festival. I think this is what you call it. Uh, so at that point of time, you said that you assembled your own bicycle when you were
Yeah,
probably in your teens. So,
yeah,
so then going ahead, 15 years of industrial experience and of responsibility in research and development, product development. And then you moved over. I mean, the curiosity probably, and you
yeah,
are quite at it every time. And then you you take industry and then you move out to academia, and you have been there for over 23 years, teaching
Yeah.
graduate students, undergraduate, and so. And I follow your blog. And you said you're going to retire, but you're the one. You're not one of the person who will retire, or never will you ever get tired. So
Well, yeah, we'll see.
no, you're not going to get tired. As a matter of fact, once I told you, I rang you up and I said, Bob, before I can finish one page of your book, you have already come out with an article, and you laughed at it. So,
Yeah. Well,
and you have now co-authored 28 books and several papers, which are research
yeah.
papers. The,
Yeah.
and peer-reviewed itself means that it is researched, and
Yep.
these are the books that is there. I got three, and Bob, honestly, if I buy all these books, I'll get bankrupt. So,
Yeah. I know.
so
It is a
thanks for
bit
writing
much.
it, and probably one by one, I will buy all these books. So
Yeah.
that's a short introduction to you. And what you are going to talk to us is about from the shop floor Kaizen to speed
Yeah.
leadership. So I'll hand
Yeah.
it
Well,
over to you, and
okay.
thank you very much for being my guest speaker. And over to you.
Okay. Yeah. So what I wanted to first of all say is a congratulations on the 50th episode. That's quite an accomplishment, and um, people like you, Mark Graban is another one who has had many podcasts and vodcasts and so forth. And the people who do this in the Lean community are, to be celebrated for their commitment to these kinds of interviews and sharing the information with other people. And I think it's a voluntary kind of activity that's very helpful to the community. So just wanted to say thank you for that. And yeah, what I was going to talk about was something called speed leadership and how the shop floor is a very inspiring place, not just for the many ideas that bad processes inspire, and you think of new ideas to improve the process, but also ideas that are offshoots that lead to other kinds of things and different ways of thinking as a result of those shop floor Kaizen experiences. And so it's a very powerful thing that I wish more people would become interested in. Um, as you know, Kaizen has taken a bit of a back seat over the last 20 years compared to things like value stream maps and A3 reports and so forth. But we need to really get back to back to Kaizen. So um, let me share with you what I'm going to talk about here. And let's go to full screen here. Where's view?
I can see the screen.
Good, good. Where's the full screen view? Adobe just recently updated this layout of Adobe, and where's view? Oh, here it is. View full screen mode. Okay. Yeah, they move things around left side, right side, and so forth. And I've just recognized this within the last week. And anyway, okay. So you mentioned a bit about my background, and yeah, my degrees are all in engineering. But in order to do the books, create the books that you showed and do that kind of research, I mean, for many years I've had to turn into a social scientist, and this really started a long time ago. Is this turn away from engineering, but nevertheless utilizing the engineering mindset, the scientific way of thinking, and so forth to study different problems as it relates to TPS and lean management and so forth. Anyways, you said I was in industry for a number of years in different areas. The focus has always been in progressive management and the associated leadership thinking and routines. And yes, I do a lot of writing, and principally that's because I had the idea, a few decades ago that I just wanted to share whatever I knew with other people and put it into some kind of written form. It's either a book, a blog, or a research paper, and so on. So anyway, so let's talk about what is leadership. That's a big question mark. What is leadership? What you see here is definition definitions came from the University of Exeter some years ago. I used to show this to my students in my innovative leadership course. And this is, of course, just a short rendering of definitions of leadership. It could go on for many more pages than this. And so one of the problems with leadership is it can be kind of anything that anybody wants it to be. And when you have such a wide range of definitions, it leads to a lot of confusion. And really, these definitions, in a sense, don't so much mean anything anymore when it can be defined so broadly. So obviously, we're not going to look at each definition, but just to recognize that there are many of them and many more than what I've shown here. You'll see in the diagram, what is a good leader? Integrity, clear goals, vision, support, encouragement, recognition, etc. I mean, yeah, these are important, but to me, this represents the old way of thinking about leadership. I'm going to present to you today a new way of thinking about leadership. This old way of thinking about leadership is based upon, oops, I don't know how that happened, personality and behaviors. And so these kinds of things are necessary but not sufficient. And we also have to recognize that this way of thinking about leadership of personality and behaviors has been around for a very long time. And overall, I think most everybody would conclude that it doesn't have much of a favorable impact in terms of how organizations are led. There, throughout time and today, especially younger generations are just not pleased with the leadership of organizations and are wanting something different than what's currently being offered. So, but leadership, we have to also recognize some things about it. And one is that it's a difficult job. There's a lot of stuff going on. It's complicated. There's many things to be attentive to. You have the problem where workers will likely distrust you. And by the way, when I say leadership, I'm generally talking about top leadership. But even in the context of first line supervision, it can be a complex job. Workers can distrust you if for no other reason that they've had other supervisors who perform poorly. And so the legacy of those supervisors means that they no longer trust supervisors generally, including a new supervisor. You have, of course, lots of problems to deal with. There is a pressure to perform. You have a boss above you and they have expectations and want you to get certain things done. What I'm also going to present to you is the idea that leadership is an error-prone job. We tend to think of people in leadership positions as there because they are highly skilled at leadership. They're accomplished both technically and also in terms of social skills or soft skills, and therefore they perform these jobs very well. Well, I will show you that these jobs are performed very poorly, and poorly would be the default position of how this function of leadership is performed. And the outliers would be the ones where the job is well performed. So we'll talk more about that shortly. Of course, when you're in a leadership position, there can be some very long hours. And if you're high enough in a company, you're basically on call 24/7. You might not get much positive feedback. I mean, real feedback, people will tell you what you want to hear. But as far as getting real feedback, that can be difficult to come by from people within the company. That's why oftentimes leaders have coaches, consultants that they've hired to provide that kind of feedback that hopefully mirrors what the feedback would be from the people within the organization. And of course, there's so much going on. It can be a very stressful and frustrating job. And part of the difficulty with leading people and making improvements is that there is just so much going on that it's difficult to think. It's very famous to hear people say, I'm a doer. I get things done. I like to do things. But when you're a doer all the time, you don't think. And of course, a leader has lots of stuff going on. And so there's many things to do. And so maybe very little time to think. And so a lot of these efforts to improve processes and change a culture and so forth, don't move forward successfully because of that. So fundamentally, let's think about what is it that leaders do? Well, they process information. Leaders are not on the shop floor, except for frontline supervisors, maybe some mid-level managers, but mid-level managers are mostly in meetings all the time. Frontline supervisors generally are not um, uh, in a value creating activity such as transforming material, but they do process information and they interact with people. And so this is fundamentally the role of leadership. They're not on the assembly line, assembling the electronics or at the stamping machine and so on. So they are fundamentally involved with processing information. Now, why is leadership important? It's important because of the really profound mental and physical impact that leaders can have on other people. And so you see in this graphic that there can be emotional disturbances that result from the pressure of the workplace and the pressure that leaders can put on people below them. There can be the attitude of being pessimistic and blaming others. There's physical symptoms of chronic fatigue, frequent headaches, lack of sleep. I mean, this comes from a high stress kind of environments. And then there's behavioral changes of being impulsive and as a leader procrastinating because there's certain things you don't really like to do, but they need to get done. So you just put it off. Feeling unhappy. You can suffer from the imposter syndrome as well, lacks of motivation to work. And all of this can lead to drug and alcohol abuse, not just among leaders, but among the people that, the followers as well. So I think it's not well appreciated the impact um, that leaders can have from a physical and mental perspective on followers. Now, the usual solution is to cast poor leadership as the employee's problem because the employee has some inability to cope. So the employee is, given some steps to eliminate stress from work. There may be some kind of employee benefit, such as yoga classes on site, or the company will pay for it or pay partly for yoga classes. But you'll get feedback, such as, or not feedback, but guidance to make sure you get sufficient sleep and meditate and exercise regularly and quit smoking and so on and so on. Basically, the idea is it's the employee that has to change. Leadership can keep doing whatever it's doing, which, as I said to you, it's error-prone job. The default position is make a lot of mistakes. Even experienced leaders, you'll see coming up how you can be have been a supervisor, climb the ladder to CEO, have 30 years of experience from supervisor to CEO, making fundamental errors in leadership still as a CEO. So this framing of it's always the employee's problem that they have to change, et cetera, is of course wrong. And it's of course unproductive to think this way. And it also gives leaders a free pass. It basically says, just do whatever you do as a leader. It doesn't matter. Other people have to adjust. So what do we want to do? Do we want to be mired in the status quo, or do we want to make some progress? My contention is that we cannot be satisfied with the situation that we have, or all the problem with leadership is dumped on the employee. We have to do better, but to do that, we need a different conception of leadership. We need to understand leadership differently. We need to think about leadership in a different way than we have thought about it previously. Now, the old way of thinking about leadership is an art, and its focus is behaviors and personality. And so if you go to these different courses and training, Myers-Briggs, emotional intelligence, authentic leadership, whatever it may be, these things are all focused on behaviors and personality. And the solutions to better leadership generally, not always, but generally are difficult to measure. They can be impractical because it doesn't connect to one's workplace directly. It's up to the person who attended the training to figure out how to make the training connect to them and their workplace. The focus, of course, is on people, not on process. So all of these leadership training that focus on behaviors and personality or focus on people. One of the things we learn from Toyota or Lean is, not to focus on process, not people. When you focus on people, it generates defensive routines. People get defensive and they don't like it. And they don't like potentially being embarrassed in front of others in a training class. And the result is, if not no progress, very little progress or extremely slow progress. So we need to transform leadership from art to a science and think of leadership in terms of cause and effect. Of course, this we know very well from our training and problem solving with the 7QC tools and so forth. Let's think about leadership differently as processes, and let's understand leadership in a series of cause and effect relationships. When we think in terms of processes, we immediately become much more practical in our focus. We are in an area of specificity with respect to the problem. To overcome the problem is something that we know from our problem-solving routines of how to do, so it's actionable. We can make it measurable. And when you focus on processes, that removes the blame game and the focus on people. And instead, it generates curiosity that people want to know more about what's going on with this process. Why is it so problematic? Why are there so many errors and mistakes or defects that are occurring in this process? So when we shift our thinking from leadership as an art and focusing on people to leadership as a science and focusing on process, we have the ability to make progress, and we could potentially make progress very quickly, depending upon how we move forward. So in this image, what you see is the leadership evolutionary tree, and for more than 100 years, the focus is on behaviors. And that may have been fine for the analog age, which we are rapidly moving away from. But even within the analog age, and I mark that up to, let's say, about 2015 and maybe sooner, but whatever, just put it at that. Even within that analog age, a lot of these things, transformational leadership training, authenticity, emotional intelligence, etc., these things can have some positive effects for people, but they're not usually a lasting effect. And so even within the framework of the analog age, these kinds of people-focused behavioral interventions are not very successful. So we're in a fast-moving digital age, and so I came up with speed leadership, which is a process-focused way to understand leadership. And I think the digital age itself does demand a process focus because, as you'll see here, things are moving quickly. The rate of change, this is like the MarTech diagram, except I didn't know about MarTech when I drew this. But we have classical leadership, which is basically the old way of managing and leading an organization, and you can continue along those lines. But what's really going on is we're in the analog age, we're in a transition period, 1980 to 2010, and we're in a digital age, and we're just in a new era. And so we cannot maintain our relationship or our way of thinking about leadership as the old way of doing things, the classical mode of leadership. We have to recognize a new era that we're in and respond to it with a new way of leading people. And of course, every business has this problem. Even small suppliers who feed typically larger companies and sometimes very large companies, they are forced to comply with the demands from their customers, which involves various new types of software and digital stuff to communicate with their customers and to share information and so on. So every business has this particular problem of this rapidly changing environment in the digital age. So being in this new era, the current leadership mindset and methods are assuredly of the past. The slow analog way of leadership burdens these fast digitized processes. And essentially what we have, because we're still very much locked into the old way of leading, we have the dead hand of the past, which is a quote from Thorstein Veblen, that's guiding us here in the future. And that really is unacceptable. We have to move forward. So let's think about how leaders solve problems. They typically do it in an unstructured way where there is a poor process, or not even, there is no process. And in this example, I'm thinking about, top leaders in a company or whatever organization. It doesn't have to be a for-profit company. But generally, and there's exceptions, but generally, when a problem arises, there's conversations with the senior management team. There may be some conversations with peer leaders. So one CEO will call up another CEO and talk about their problem. They may get information from subordinates, prepare a report or give me a briefing or presentation that talks about something or other, whatever the problem is. Or they may hire consultants to dig into whatever the problem is and brief the leaders. Or they may do some combination of these things. What essentially we have here is a social problem-solving process. That's how leaders solve problems. It is a social problem-solving process. Now, that's not necessarily a bad thing, because there are other types of social problem-solving processes, that you would encounter in teamwork, and Kaizen would be an example of that. But is this social problem-solving process structured or unstructured? And if it's unstructured, the difficulty here is that, when there's conversations with a consultant or with the management team or with subordinates or whomever, oftentimes there's somebody with a very strong personality in the room whose view will tend to prevail, and it might be the wrong view that prevails. And so structured problem solving is intended to reduce the possibility, in some cases eliminate the possibility, that the most influential person in the room gets their way. In other words, we're dealing here with the facts of the matter rather than somebody's influence. So I came up with something called speed leadership, which is recasting leadership as processes. And let me explain first what speed leadership is not. It is not a new management system. It is not culture change. It is not personal transformation, and it is not business transformation. And when I developed speed leadership, I set out specifically to avoid these kinds of things, because they're major. New management system, we learned from 35 years of lean that that's not very attractive to most leaders. They're not interested in a new management system. Some leaders are interested in culture change, but it depends. They don't want to necessarily want wholesale cultural change. Personal transformation is difficult, and so is business transformation. These things tend to be off-putting, and people, don't like doing these things. That they get bureaucratized, they're fearful of these things, and so forth. So I wanted to just sort of remove that from what I was developing here. So what I wanted to develop was a new way to think about how leadership would be a more clear path to a better way of leading people that is agnostic to any management system. Meaning, if your company runs with classical management or TQM or Six Sigma or Lean or TPS or you name it, whatever you like, speed leadership could fit within those framework. It is not beholden to any one type of management system. I also wanted to develop something that was very simple to understand. And we know from experience that if something is difficult and complicated, and like lean management is, to transition from classical management to lean management organization, it is difficult, it is complicated, it takes a long time, and therefore it makes it difficult to put it into practice. Of course, it's not impossible. We see examples of so-called lean transformation, etc. But generally speaking, in a workplace setting, something needs to be simple in order for it to be put into practice. And again, there really is nothing to fear. So where did speed leadership come from? It came from Kaizen. So my hands-on experiences with shop floor Kaizen, as well as a lot of office Kaizen, because I never abandoned, what I learned on the shop floor, I brought with me into my work as an educator in higher education to apply TPS principles and practices to teaching, and apply Kaizen to my job as a teacher. So this is where it comes from, and without these experiences, I'm sure I would have never thought about speed leadership. So I asked a couple of simple questions one day, and this would be around 2011, 2010. I said, boy, you know, as a so-called lean thinker, or as being trained in Kaizen and TPS and the Toyota way, we think a lot about things in terms of processes. But why don't we think of leadership as processes? We don't do that. We think of leadership as behaviors. We think of it as traits. We think of it as personalities, but we don't think of it as processes. Why not? And then the next question is, well, let's do that. Let's think of leadership as processes, and what happens if we do think of leadership that way? And so what do we do in a process? If you look at the bottom image, you know, we observe a process, we find the problems in the process, we determine cause and effect, we identify countermeasures, we evaluate the countermeasure, see that it's working as we expected, and standardize if it is working as expected. And so I'm just applying this line of thinking to leadership. It's very simple, very easy to understand. Anybody who is skilled in the 7QC tools, and I've had people tell me that, you know, this speed leadership fits in perfect with Lean World, perfect complement to that, to simplify and understanding what leadership is. So let's talk for a moment about what is a process. You know, definitionally, it's a series of actions or steps that are taken in order to achieve a particular end. So we have a typical process. There's processing time, there's queue time, and there's lead time. And of course, we know, because most processes are batch and queue, that the processing time is a lot less than the queue time. That results in delays and stagnation and errors in the process and rework and so forth and so on. We use the word process a lot. I mean, people generally, not just, you know, people in Lean World or whatever, but people generally use the word process a lot, but they typically do not understand the details. So for most people, process is an abstract, you know, they have an abstract understanding of what the process is. They don't really understand it in the detail. So let's look at an example. If you break it down and say, okay, what do leaders do? They process information. So here's an example of a decision-making process. The first step is to recognize that there's a problem. Well, what's the source of that problem? Could be internal or external. Then there's usually a queue as you move to step 2 to assess the problem. Is it a perceived problem, or is it an actual problem? Is it a repeat problem, or is it a unique problem? And then there's usually a queue. Then you get to step 2A, B, and C, which is, if do you use a known solution if it's a repeat problem? Is it if it's a unique problem, collect information, or you could just ignore the problem or delay dealing with it. And then there's another queue, and then we get to the third one, you know, analyze the problem. By what method are you going to analyze it? Is it structured or unstructured? Both of them can be quick. Both of them can be very time consuming. Then there's a queue. Then you identify a solution. Are you looking at the one best way, one best solution, or are you identifying options, different solutions to try and see what happens? Again, there's a queue. You evaluate those choices by what method. Is it whatever's expedient, you can get done quickly, put the Band-Aid on, appease the boss, tell them we fixed it, or is it you looking for effectiveness to eliminate repeat errors? Queue time again, then make a decision. How much time did it take to get to that point? And why did it take a long time? Taking a long time is not necessarily a bad thing, but if it could have been done in 1/10 of the time, why wasn't it done in 1/10 of the time? Anyway, then you implement the decision. Is there a delay in implementation, etc.? And then you evaluate the results. Did it work? Why or why not? A lot of problems are supply driven. I refer to them as supply driven because the associated decisions are based on perceived problems. Because managers are not engaged in value adding work, so they spend a lot of time in meetings with a lot of these problems are more perceived than real. So it's looking busy. But then there's demand driven problems. The problems that are, you know, actual problems that require decision making. And we all know from our industry experiences that a lot of times we have difficulties if we're at lower levels in the organization of telling managers there's a problem here and we needs attention and so forth. And they're like, ah, forget about it. But we also get a lot of stuff from upper management that says, you know, XYZ is a problem and we need to deal with it, but it's not really a problem. So when I ask myself, you know, what happens if we think about leadership as processes? Well, first of all, you have to think about what the processes might be. And so I thought about that, and I said, as a leader, you know, when I was in an executive position, what were the processes that I was engaged in? So I identified 15 leadership processes, and then I said to myself, what mistakes did I make in these leadership processes? And I identified a bunch of mistakes. We'll talk more about that later. And then as I move forward with this way of thinking, I started to apply Toyota Production System concepts to leadership processes to understand what is the function of leadership, how do we right-size leadership, what are the standards for leadership, what's the standard work, what are the visual controls that we could use for leadership, and so on. And so I ended up writing all this up in a book that was published in 2015 called Speed Leadership. It's a thin little book. I think it's like 140 pages, but probably 20 pages, 30 pages are our worksheets for you to fill things in and, you know, complete the information, answer the questions asked or fill in the information and so forth. So it's not a difficult book to read at all. It's not 600 pages. It's around 140, maybe even 130, 125, something like that. Anyway, so let's talk about the 15 leadership processes. Leading and managing people, planning and budgeting, workload management, decision-making, problem recognition and response, problem solving, management reviews, employee feedback and coaching, team meetings, asking questions, listening and receiving feedback, information sharing, developing people, performance appraisal, walking around, go see, and stakeholder engagement. And there can be more, you know, because a top leader would be involved in, developing strategy. Leaders are typically involved in interviewing people, and so on. So there's a few more than 15. So when I went about and say, what kind of mistakes did I make in these various processes? I identified about 10 errors overall per process, so about 150 errors. But as I was developing this idea, I started to give this as a homework assignment to my students. And I started to introduce them to the idea of speed leadership in a very sketchy way, but started to develop it with their help in identifying more of these errors. So I created a Google Docs thing, and students would submit all the errors that they identified for these 15 processes. And these students, by the way, were graduate students who are full-time working professionals, so they had 10 to 30 years of experience. So this is not undergraduates, and this is not like full-time grad students with no work experience. So these students had no problem populating the Google Docs spreadsheet with errors. And some students identified more and some less. Now, each student filled out a spreadsheet. And what I did was, believe it or not, I would, every semester that this assignment was given, I'd collate all that information. I would go through, you got to understand the job that this was. Each student might identify 10 to 20 errors per process times 15 students. Anyway, I would collate all that information into a master spreadsheet, eliminate the repeats and so forth, so that we would have a spreadsheet that reflected the class's input of the errors. And when you put the class on the job here rather than me, they would find roughly double the number of errors that I recognized that I made as a leader. And so what you see here in the next slide is an example of the kind of errors that leaders make. Now, these are errors that are perceived by followers, okay? These are not necessarily errors that leaders would recognize, but the followers, people who are subject to the leader, you know, your boss. These are the errors that they would recognize. So before you look in the middle, look at the right-hand side. What you see is the data here from a Fortune 50 or a Fortune 100, certainly a Fortune 100 company. I think they're Fortune 50. So a top global corporation. And we convened a bunch of people that they were on the younger side. They had about 10 years of experience, I would say on average, maybe 12. So they were in their early to mid 30s. And they identified with their leaders in their company 342 errors. So when I say leadership is an error-prone job, it is. We think of it as error-free. It's not. It's error-prone. So now you start to realize this is a really tough job. You also start to realize why a lot of people don't want to be a leader. They don't necessarily know about all these errors, but they'll say things like they don't like the politics, they don't like to deal with other people's problems, and so on. But there's also this. So if you look at some of these errors, we're just going to look at a few, because the important thing to realize here is this is real world. This isn't some theory cooked up by me or the students. We've all had bosses who are like this. If we have been a boss, we've done these things. One of the interesting things about speed leadership is you cannot run away from this as a boss. You cannot say this is not reality. This is what's actually going on. Leaders who are unable to connect with the employees, leaders who don't understand the employee's role, they don't know what the job actually entails, they micromanage, they don't trust the workers, they don't listen to employees, they don't respect employees. Leader gives errors that lead to mistakes and confusion. They blame employees for mistakes that they're not responsible, and so on and so on. This is just, systemic problems associated with leadership. And you can think to all the leaders that you've had and put a check mark by each one of these, or say, yeah, I've seen that one, I've seen that one, I've seen that one. Or you can look at this and say, yeah, I've done that one, I've done that one, I've done that one. And if we're honest with ourselves as leaders, I identify 148 that I made, that I made. And then these other ones certainly reflect things that I've made and saw. We got a big problem here. And of course, this is why when you look at the Gallup surveys and so forth of employee engagement and what they think of leadership and so forth, the result is either steadily bad or declining. So we have a big problem here that we need to attend to. Now, if you're in a leadership role, all these errors make your job that much harder. And of course, the business results suffer for your team, for your group, for your functional area, for your company. You have the problem with these errors of there's constant rework. People come back to you. Is this what you meant? It wasn't what you meant. Is this what you wanted? Not what you wanted, etc. It takes a longer time to complete the tasks. You're overloaded with work. You're overcommitted. This makes the job stressful and frustrating, and it shouldn't be. That's the idea behind speed leadership, is to eliminate those kind of stresses and frustrations. You're so tired and burnt out, you react slowly when problems arise. When employees come to you, even with good news, the interaction is poor. And the result of all of this is making even more errors. Now, understand and think about in the previous slide, a small company with 5 leaders, making all these errors on any given day, rotating through these errors and so forth. That's a problem. But think about a very large company with 4,000 leaders, from supervisor to CEO, all making these kinds of errors every day. It's toxic to an organization. So what you have is leaders working very hard, but not a lot of improvement. And I'm meaning improvement generally within the organization because of all these errors that are made. And these errors are constantly recurring. You may not do all 48 errors in one category in a day. You might do 2 in this category, 4 in another, 1 in another, 0 in another category, 12 in another category. That's what your day is like, making mistakes. And the book has what you saw in the 2 slides ago with all the listing of all the errors. The Speed Leadership book has similar accounting of errors for each one of the 15 leadership processes to get the total of 342. So what are these constantly recurring leadership process errors causes? Time delays, poor quality information, and especially problematic is blocked information flows. And when you analyze companies, myself and my co-author Massimo Torinesi, we came out with a book recently called The Wheel of Fortune, which is the method I developed to analyze business failures. And we find in all examples of the business failures we have analyzed, Boeing 737 MAX, Wells Fargo fraud, 70 cases over the years that we've analyzed of major product line or business failures, blocked information flows plays a key role. So it is very important to make sure information flows back and forth in a company like the tides rather than being blocked. It also has the effect of, reducing innovation, responsiveness, and competitiveness. Now, we don't want to blame people, but what we want to certainly be clear about is we have good people trapped in bad processes. In this case, it's bad leadership processes. And I just also want to make a point here just to make sure people are centered upon the idea. We're not talking about shop floor processes here. We're talking about leadership processes that leaders are engaged in. Could be supervisor to CEO, but these are leadership processes. So one of the things we need to do is think of these errors and all the mistakes that are happening as like you've killed someone. One of the things I learned from my Japanese sensei is you have to dramatize problems. Otherwise, people will not take action. And that's why you have the andon cord. The andon cord basically is saying we have a problem, the line is stopped. The line has a financial value of, let's say, $30,000 a minute, $20,000 a minute. So everybody knows that when the andon light goes on, it's important, and you convene a team of people to triage, to diagnose the problem and correct it so the line gets moving. So we have to think of these leadership problems, since leaders are processing information and interacting with people, that you've killed someone. You've killed, by making these errors, you've killed the people that report to you, the people in the company, the employees, the salaried workers, the hourly workers. You've killed their interests, their ideas, their creativity, their motivation, their happiness, their health, their participation, their energy, enthusiasm, dreams. You've killed all of them for the people. Your company, you're killing its responsiveness, its ability to innovate quickly, morale, teamwork, suppliers, competitiveness, profits, energy, productivity, customers. If you don't think of it this way, you'll just keep making the same mistakes. You'll just ignore it and keep making the same mistake. So let's think about this leadership in the analog versus digital age. In the analog age, what do we do as leaders? We blame people for problems. We fix recurring problems. We have bureaucracy. We want to maintain the status quo. New ideas bubble up from the bottom, but we destroy those because it's going to hurt our cash cow or, result in some other kind of change that's undesirable according to the leaders. And we have basically chaos and complexity. And I refer to this as stagnation leadership. So you see information over time, and it's linear. And the derivative of information over time is flow. You can see flow is flat in the analog type of business because information is increasing linearly because of the status quo orientation of the organization. Now, the digital age, what do we have to do? We have to blame processes for problems, not people. We have new problems, new and different types of problems to solve, in addition to our old ones. We need to implement and try new things quickly. We need to generate new ideas, and we need to have control, but yet we need to have simplicity. And so that's why, of course, in the lean world or TPS, we have visual controls and other kinds of things like that. And here you see information increasing exponentially, and the derivative of that is information flowing. You can see it rising over time. And that's what we want to happen in organizations, is information to flow increasingly over time and not be static and stuck. We want it to be dynamic type of environment we're in rather than a static environment. So what are we trying to do here with speed leadership? Simplify leadership, and all those mistakes make it very complicated. So you can imagine if you start to eliminate some of those mistakes, you might make the job easier, leader's job easier. You'd, of course, by eliminating those errors, start to eliminate delays and rework. You would have the effect of improving leadership skills, capability, and importantly, impact. By impact, I mean things like credibility, confidence, and trust in your leadership. And by speed leadership, I mean helping employees do good work quickly and effectively. So that's where the speed leadership comes in. It's not beating leaders up. It's eliminating these problems so that employees can do good work quickly and effectively. And that's what most employees like to do. They like to get a task, do it quickly, and do it effectively, and then move on to the next task. So speed leadership will help leaders in their interaction with employees do that. We have to be able to respond to our fast changing conditions, but we can only do it with a new understanding of leadership, where we understand leadership as time, information, and information flow. So this is my recasting of leadership into a different model rather than personality, behaviors, and traits to time, information, and information flow. It's essentially saying it doesn't much matter what your personality traits and behaviors are as long as you don't make those mistakes. And you will see it when you read Speed Leadership book that there's some intersection between those behaviors, traits, and personality and the errors that leaders make. But fundamentally, the focus here is on time, information, and information flow. So so what that leads to is a new definition of leadership: the rate of change in information over time. And I'm wearing my definition to leadership today on my t-shirt. So think of leadership as DIDT, effective leadership as DIDT. What do leaders do? Well, they're supposed to make good products. And let's think about this. The cost of management is the same from one company to another, roughly. You know, if you're a $2 billion company, you probably have roughly the same amount of managers from one company to another for a given sector, such as manufacturing. Obviously, if it's $1 billion manufacturing or service business, it could be two different numbers of managers in an organization. But the cost, let's say, is roughly the same for a given sector. The difference, of course, in leadership is speed and quality. Speed of recognizing problems, speed of problem solving, speed of decision making, and so forth. That's really the difference, what makes a difference. So leaders can make good or bad quality products based upon how they process information. So you're interacting with people, you're processing information. The good products would be good decisions, harmony with the teams, with your team and between teams, productivity, improving productivity, clarity, good relationships, developing people, change that is in step with the times, not change that is, should have happened 4 years ago is happening today. Change that is in step with the time, energy and enthusiasm. You're kind of a leader that energizes and makes people enthusiastic. The bad products, of course, you make bad decisions. There's conflict within your team or between teams. There's idleness, things not getting done, confusion, bad relationships. People regress. They have a lot of motivation and energy, but because of the way you lead, they regress. They're pulling back. They're not sharing their ideas and so forth. You're stuck in the status quo. People are apathetic and so on. This is, of course, making bad products. And what we have a lot of, and it's not the whole, it's not everything, but we have a lot of leaders making bad products these days. Teams are demotivated. They don't understand expectations, what they're supposed to do, and so forth. So I like to simplify leadership as, or what great leadership as, it's individuality. You have your personality, your traits, your behaviors. Most of them are okay. but eliminate the errors. So great leadership is individuality minus the errors. And so what you want to do is simply, like any process improvement, reduce the lead time from, whatever you're trying to help somebody with or the problem to recognizing that to completing it. So culture change is a big challenge for organizations, and it tends to be ephemeral, meaning there's some big culture change going on at GE now with Larry Culp. Now, whether it's there's always a question with the CEO Larry Culp at GE. There's always a question if the culture change in like U.S.-based businesses is proceeding with GE's at the same pace with GE's businesses that maybe are in Europe or Asia or whatever. But it's a big deal, culture change, and it's hard to do. And so with speed leadership, I'm saying that culture change may not be necessary. If you eliminate the errors, you may not have to go down that road. The other thing is when, Larry Culp from GE retires and a new leader comes in, what happens to, what Mr. Culp did? In a lot of cases, changes in ownership, changes in leadership produce a new and different culture. So culture change being ephemeral and difficult to do, maybe it's not actually necessary. And we don't usually think of that. We're always thinking, we need culture change. We need culture change. Well, you know what? Maybe we don't. So speed leadership is provocative in a lot of ways of suggesting that our usual way of thinking about things is outdated, could be wrong, or in need of revision. Now, what are the consequences of leadership process errors? I mentioned earlier the 70 or so cases that we looked at in the graduate course where we're doing a type of failure analysis, a much more detailed type of analysis of a corporate failure than, say, an A3 report. But just to highlight the Boeing 737 MAX disaster, as a big part of it was blocked information flows. Leaders didn't want to hear what people at lower levels had to say, and the people didn't trust the leaders and so forth. And you get this huge, tragic disasters with these aircraft. So my point here is that leadership process errors are consequential. They are life-threatening on a scale such as what you see here, but they're also life-threatening on a scale that you don't see, because when employees are under constant stress, there's all kinds of things that happens to your body, hardening of the arteries, gaining visceral body fat, anxiety. There's all kinds of physical and chemical changes that happen to your body that essentially help drive poor health in workers. And of course, leaders are always saying, oh, our healthcare costs are too high in cases like in the US where companies pay for it. And none of them say, how are we leading? How does that contribute to this problem of high healthcare costs? They don't think of that, but they do. They should. They need to. So think about, other professions, because leadership, management, these are professions. You're hired in these particular roles to do these things. Do other professionals make as many errors? You saw 342 for the 15 leadership processes. That doesn't include, strategy meetings. That doesn't include interviewing people. That doesn't include, I don't know what. There's going to be a couple more. What about a golfer? If you're a professional now, if you're an amateur, we're not talking about that. We're talking about professional golfer. How many errors do they make? Not a lot. You see a golf tournament. Depends upon how hard the course is, but the number of errors will be, above par, 5 above par, 10 above par. So 5 or 10 errors on 18 holes and however many, 72 strokes. But of course, the professionals will be well under par. You go to a concert to hear a musician, professional musician. When you buy the ticket, you don't say to yourself, I won't paying, $200, $500, $1,000 for this ticket. I don't mind if I hear the musicians make, 20 or 30 errors. You're expecting to hear, perfect music. A machinist, a physician, engineer, architect, airplane pilot, ship captain, truck driver. Everybody makes mistakes. Everybody makes errors. But professionals in these fields make few errors. And the point of this slide is to say that if you're a professional, you make few errors. If you are an amateur, you make a lot of errors. A characteristic of professionalism is few errors. An amateur leader, and this is what speed leadership reveals, is the amateurish nature of leadership because of all these errors. And I'm talking CEOs with 30 years experience, whatever, same thing, amateur. You have bureaucracy, micromanaging, blaming people for problems, ignoring suggestions, blocking ideas and information flow, self-interested status quo. What is a professional leader? Develops self, develop others, helps others, doesn't stop learning, promotes effective teamwork and collaboration, inspires and motivates people, coaches and teach people. That doesn't mean they're always sweet and soft and nice, but there's a clear difference between a professional leader, and you've all had them. I used to ask my students, think in your head of all the bosses that you've had in your work experience, how many of them were professional type of leader, and how many of them were amateur, and what would they say? 10%, 1 or 2 out of 10 were professional, the rest were amateur in varying degrees of bad. Some were not so bad, others were horrible. So we need to think about, again, rethink what leadership is and think about it in terms of professionalism. So something here to keep in mind, this quote from Kiyoshi Furuta. You may have seen the book, Welcome Problems, Find Success. He said, many organizations have failed to sustain success because they never realized their problems or they uncovered their problems too late to remain competitive. I would add to that in red at the bottom left, and they did not do a good job when they were solving problems. It was Band-Aids. So in other words, they didn't realize they had these problems to begin with. When they did, it was a Band-Aid. And the Band-Aid in the context here of speed leadership is, go to emotional intelligence training, Myers-Briggs. It's all a people focus rather than a process focus of improving how you lead. I might also add that one day I was doing some work for a very large software company, and I had some collaboration with a person from a major consulting company. We were both engaged with this major software company. And the consultant that I was working with had worked at Toyota for 4 or 5 years. And I asked this person their opinion of the leadership team at this large company compared to the leadership team at Toyota. And he said it was a night and day difference, meaning professionalism versus amateur. Now, that doesn't mean with amateur leadership, a company can't be successful. You see it all the time. And if we define success as profitability and stock price and so forth. But you always have these problems of companies running into a wall because they can no longer innovate. It takes them too long to innovate. They don't recognize changes in the marketplace. They don't recognize changes in the people that they're hiring, younger generations coming in that have different wants and needs. Their products start to become uncompetitive. Their services start to falter. They become inwardly focused. They're immune to outside feedback, criticism from the outside. They read their own annual report and think they're great. And so all of this starts to accumulate as a result of the amateur leadership that has transpired for a long time that ends up catching up to organizations. So, this is a small book with a lot of big ideas, and I think you'll be fascinated in particular by the discussion of, let me find it here, where I take the TPS concepts and apply them to leadership. To analyze what is the function of leadership? What is leadership supposed to do? Are they supposed to do everything, soup to nuts, or is it really a much narrower function? How do you right-size leadership? We talk about right-sizing equipment on the shop floor. You have a big piece of equipment to make a small part. This big piece of equipment produces 1,000 pieces an hour. You need only 50 pieces an hour. So we want to right size this equipment. We want to make it the size of a human being, shoulder height, etc. How do we apply that concept to leadership? What are the standards for leadership? Do you know what they are? Have you ever thought about that? What the standards should be? What should be the standard work for leadership for these various processes? We're not trying to make leaders a clone of one another, and this is the standard work for every leader for every team meeting. That doesn't make sense. That makes it stupid. We want to, again, keep it simple, keep it practical. But the team's leaders vary widely in how they run their team meetings, too widely. And they'll convey in different amounts of information. So we've all seen it. There's some company directive coming down from the top. One team meets with their leader, gets some information. Another team meets with a different leader, gets their information. Then the people on those two teams talk to one another and find out different amounts of information have been conveyed to them. One leader conveyed a lot, another leader conveyed a little. That's not what you want to have happen. Also, what kind of visual controls can you put in place for a better leadership, as reminders for leaders of what they should do in a given leadership process? And we had a lot of fun in my graduate class in assignments for students to come up with visual controls to improve these leadership processes. Again, this is all very practical stuff, very practical process improvement stuff that we learn in Kaizen. So that is the that's the title of this, reflected from the shop floor Kaizen to speed leadership. So with that, thank you for listening. And Dr. M, you got questions? Let me stop to share. I'm having trouble finding my mouse at the moment. What's going on here? Little problem. Dr. M, I can't hear you.
Yeah, I said I don't have questions per se, but again, you have ignited a lot of thoughts in me. So if we can stop sharing, we can have a 2 minutes chat on this. This took much questions I can always ask you. So we can stop sharing and then we can talk to each other for 2 minutes.
Yeah, unfortunately, I don't have a mouse. Not showing up here, so I can't stop the share. But you could let's ask questions.
That doesn't matter.
Yeah.
You can.
Was it there?
Yeah, one of the things that I really liked in this is, 10 years that, I was reflecting more on myself as you did, of my 10 years in a leadership position as a director and president and vice president. I think 320 would be too less a figure of error. The other thing that I liked in the presentation that you made was you did not use big jargons, which doesn't mean anything these days. It's like transformation, culture. I did my doctoral work in organization, culture, etc. But then those are with multiple variables, etc., and not that easy to handle, as you rightly said. The third thing that I really liked about is that you talked about a process and of leadership on various critical, significant things that affect. Although we said earlier we should be people focused and people behavior focused, but what you are also advocating in the process also has this impact on all the manpower and all the workforce with engagement or whatever theory concept is there on motivation, etc. Everything is being taken care of, but in an extremely structured process manner. Unlike
Yes.
somebody comes in as a chairman and he has his whims and fancies or what succeeded or what influenced him, but you have a
Yep.
certain structure, and that structure, like any other standard operating procedure, get revised as and when the technology changes. And today,
Right.
unlike the years that I was there and you were there, we didn't have the support of technology. Now we have
Right.
the support of technology. So this, what you said about delta I by delta T, the rate of spreading the
Change of
information
information over time. Yeah.
becomes feasible. You're not suggesting anything impossible. You're
Nope.
only asking them to just move ahead and look at what has happened, more to do with introspection and remove the errors. You're not
That's it.
talking about anything else, but can you identify the errors? Can you do honest self reflection, like what I'm going to do? And I'm going to lose my sleep over there because I know how many errors that I have made. But I love this presentation, sir, and thank you very
Well, thank
much.
you. Let me,
And
if I could say a thing here that
yeah,
the 342 errors. I mean, obviously, if you're a leader, um, you're to tell somebody you got to eliminate these 342 errors is not going to make sense. That's not simple and practical. But what one would realize in looking at all these errors, if you read the book, is that some of these are interconnected. So if you eliminate this one here, it takes care of
right,
eliminating three
right,
errors over there.
yeah,
And you can there's wonderful things that you can do with this spreadsheet, company by company spreadsheet of and how you would structure a training, follow on training to eliminate those errors, and follow on not just training, but what an actual leader would do day to day to implement the errors. Which in one way would be just review one of the categories in the morning and make a commitment not to make an error in there that day. The other thing is with that spreadsheet, and having done a number of these over the years, that while the total number of error changes 342, 255, 302, 225, so many of them repeat from one company or spreadsheet to another, which shows that these are just basic, fundamental, systemic errors that exist in leadership. And that's globally. It doesn't matter if it's in Asia or Europe or Africa or wherever. This is just the sort of, I don't want to say background noise, but it is the the foundation, the crumbling foundation off which leadership works.
it's something that we have to recognize that it does exist.
Yeah, and there's no hiding from it. I mean,
Yeah,
no leader can look at this and say, I've never made that mistake, or I'm not making that mistake now. I mean, there's somewhere out of those, in any category. I don't care if they're CEO of a Fortune, of Apple, whatever. There's going to be mistakes that Tim Cook is making in every one of those categories every day.
I'm just thinking about, I got two millennium kids, and they don't have time to listen or to get information. They would rather say, Dad, if you want, you send the message fast. All what they are interested is to get the information as fast as possible, and they got resources to do that. Now, all what I'm saying is, are the current leaders, there would be a time taken for this transition to take place and people to absorb what you have been saying, and we would be spreading it around, and it makes a lot of sense. I asked somebody that, are you ready for reverse mentoring? That you go down and ask the kids,
Yeah, yeah,
how do you do this? How do you do that? Because the analog leaders, as you say, they're supposed to be strong if they have an answer for everything, even if it is a
right.
wrong answer, like most of the parents do that to children. So
Yeah,
there's a probably certain changes that what your speed leadership as you advocate in digital age. And as I said, technology being available, it becomes easier. Then what we uh, we experienced that we had to talk to people, and what we communicated may not be the same thing that went down the line with all the biases.
Right, right. Yes, absolutely. That's right. So yeah, there's also a version of speed leadership training that I've done that has um, a number of different training modules that are extremely innovative. Um, that unfortunately the world doesn't seem to be ready for. It's a really unconventional mode of leadership training. That's so much fun, but uh,
You do this online?
I can do it online, yeah. But
So I'll get in touch with you, and let's see. Probably if, I will be the first one to get enrolled when
we'll
it's
see.
age doesn't matter to me. I mean, I am here to learn.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
thank you very much, Bob, for this new insight that you're given. And I said tonight it'll be a nightmare for me because the errors that I have made.
Yeah, I mean it's a but we have to be honest with
Yeah,
ourselves.
that's
And if we
true.
are, if we
That's
are,
true.
we can start to make progress. Well, thank you very much for having me on your vodcast. I
Thank you, Bob.
greatly
Thank you, Bob.
appreciate it. And
Thank
I
you, Bob.
admire what you're doing with these vodcasts, and it's always a pleasure to
Thanks
talk
a
to you.
lot. And I don't edit any of my podcast, and in all probabilities, tomorrow
Okay,
it'll be there on the LinkedIn. I'll send you the link because it's converted into YouTube, my
yep,
YouTube channel, and I'll send you the
good.
link. And thank you very much. And we say namaste because it's time neutral. We say namaste for good morning, good evening, good afternoon. We say namaste when we welcome people, and we say namaste when we say see you again. So namaste,
Okay.
Bob, and take care of yourself.
Namaste, Dr. M. Thank you. Are we all set? Okay.